Hello everyone, welcome to MBIE's briefing for External Recruitment Services. Thank you all for coming along. Appreciate you coming out here today. You can see our building is not quite as it was prior to the earthquake, but we're getting back into shape. So a few introductions to get us underway. I'm Angela Zagalis, I'm the Manager for Collaborative Procurement. With me today is Susan Haynes, the AoG Manager for Professional Services, and John Richards, who is our Senior Procurement Analyst for Professional Services. So just a little bit about all of government and our AoG program. So taken collectively, government procurement is quite a significant activity in our economy. The New Zealand government spends approximately $39 billion annually on goods and services, and that's approximately 18% of our GDP. So for every dollar that government spends, about 37 cents of it is spent with third-party suppliers. So what we buy ranges from IT to electricity, gas, office stationery and air travel, and of course recruitment services. Because of its size, government procurement plays an important role in driving efficiencies, productivity and economic growth. So what we buy and how we buy it can have quite a significant influence on the economy. With $39 billion at stake, government's driver for better public services and economic growth brought forward the Government Procurement Reform Program. Now that was developed in 2009 and it was intended to lift the performance of the public sector and inform better public services. In 2012, MBIE was named as the Procurement Functional Lead for Government. Now in order to shape procurement excellence, which is one of the things we're tasked with, as well as delivering value to New Zealand, it's our function as government procurement to deliver on three key objectives which drive our program of work. And those objectives, just briefly, are to create an environment where New Zealand businesses can succeed by making it easier for companies such as yourselves to do business with government. We also strive to increase the performance, add value and maximise results of government by aligning our policy with good practice. We try to improve capability by enhancing the commercial skills of agencies and also increase collaboration within government. And thirdly, we look to unlock cost savings by harnessing the collective buying power of government and changing government's buying behaviour to achieve value for money. So with these objectives in mind, the AoG contracts were established to harness the collective buying power of government by establishing single supplier agreements for common goods and services. Now, these AoG contracts were designed to take some of the hassle out of procurement, some of you might not think so, and to also allow government agencies to focus on more business outcomes and make government the customer of choice for suppliers by standardising engagements and reducing transaction costs. If we look at the all of government contracts in the context of government's $39 billion annual spend with third-party providers, we have 18 contracts that account for between 3 and 5% of that figure. It's a pretty big number and it's spent across a broad range of eligible agencies who are able to participate in the AoG program. And you'll see that tiny wee picture in the square box on the left there, and that's available on our website as well. But essentially, we've got 300 agencies and nearly 2,500 schools who are able to participate in AoG contracts. We've also got 18 contracts in place at the moment. So what the AoG contracts do, they offer successful suppliers access to the business of eligible agencies through one procurement process. What they don't do, however, is guarantee you any business or sales volumes. That's entirely up to you. Now, this has been described to me as a love triangle. I'm sure you can think of a better description, but essentially this is where the magic happens. You've got MBIE at the top of the triangle there, and we have a confidentiality agreement, a memorandum of understanding and a letter of accession between us and the participating agency. The relationship between providers and MBIE is by virtue of a services agreement, which many of you will be familiar with, and the relationship between the providers and the participating agencies is by virtue of a recruitment services order. So that's just a bit of scene setting for you. I'll hand over to Susan, who's going to talk to you more about the specifics of the RFP.
So the first thing that I've got to talk to you around is the current state of the External Recruitment Services contract. We have 138 participating agencies, so that's agencies who are buying through the contract. And we average around $250 million worth of spend through the contract per year. Now that spend covers everything from the salaries of the candidates that you provide to us through markup and AoG fee. An additional $50 to $60 million a year is spent on services for payroll-only contractors, which is currently an additional service under the contract. We'll talk a little bit more about payroll later, but it has become one of the biggest additional services that agencies are buying under this contract. So, and at $50 to $60 million a year, that's a significant amount of spend. There's a panel of 40 providers. We started with a few more than that, and we've lost a few along the way. But we're now at a panel of 40, which is working very well for us and working for our government agencies. And over the life of the contract, we've saved around $79 million for our government agencies through this contract. So over the 5 years that this, or 4.5 years that this contract's been running, it's been one of the best contracts that we've had as AoG in terms of the savings that we've been able to deliver to government. So this graph shows how our spend grew over the life of the contract and what the pattern of that spend and savings looks like now. So to start off with, you can see that we had a gradual climb in terms of spend through the contract. And what we're now seeing is some normalisation of a pattern around seasonal adjustments for when and where we recruit across the contract. The contract covers placements in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, and we've seen Christchurch and Auckland grow considerably over the life of the contract. They were a little slow to take up, but we've now got some really big agencies in those areas. Auckland Council, for instance, up in Auckland, and Canterbury University and Christchurch City Council down in Christchurch. So they are now really showing an interest in these contracts. They're really starting to talk to people in their regions about getting people on board and getting them on stream with coming onto the AoG contract. So we are seeing it growing, and we are looking at a more regional focus now as we go into the second generation of this contract. I've been working on the contract for around 3 years now alongside Emma, and we've seen some real change and real shift in our relationship with the supply market and your relationships with agencies. We're reaching a real level of maturity now around recruitment services, which we really want to make the most of in the next generation of this contract. We want to build on those good relationships that we as the COE have been able to build with you, and those good relationships that agencies have with you as well, and actually further promulgate the good practice that there is out there amongst agencies and share that among the broader agency community to improve the ease of engagement that we have with our supply market. So on the subject of the next generation of the contract, I'm going to hand you over to John, who is effectively Emma today. Not quite as tall as Emma. And he's going to take you through the RFP, which we hope you've all seen, that we published on Monday.
So, as you would know, this is a return to market. So the original agreement came into place in 2012. The first thing I'd like to say about what we're doing here is at no time have we made change for change's sake. What we're looking to do here is iterative. We're building on something which is now what we would class as a very successful all-of-government agreement. So we want to take what's good and build on that. As Susan said, we've added services for payroll-only contractors as something that we saw was a very successful additional service, so we brought it essentially into the main house. So again, as with the existing agreement, we're looking for permanent, temporary and contractors. In 2 job lots. That's basically just trying to simplify what we did before. So those 2 job lots are Common Administration and Corporate, which used to be separated, and Common IT. As I said, we're looking for services for payroll-only contractors. And as Susan mentioned, we're still focusing on Wellington, Auckland and Christchurch. We did look whether we should go further, so cities like Dunedin and Hamilton were looked at. Again, the amount of spend that occurs in those cities from an all-of-government point of view didn't justify the amount of effort we would take the supplier community and ourselves through. Now, additional services. As Susan mentioned, services for payroll-only contractors was one of those. It's now kind of stepped out of being an additional service, and as I said, it's right in the main fold now. But additional services, as you can see, include things like psychometric assessments, interview support. So we are looking for our supplier community to also provide those if it's something that they do. There's also a bit of a list here about what's not included. Those of you, and I hope you're all on GETS and you've all got your settings well set up, will see that the State Services Commission has just released a tender for this SSC Executive Recruitment Panel and the Assessment Panel. That is not covered by this piece of work. It's completely separate. We also are very keen, as you'll see in the RFP document, to not step on the toes of the AoG Consultancy Services Agreement, legal services and advertising and design. We also don't go into specialist areas. So if you're talking government employees that essentially wear a uniform, that are sworn officers or fire service, first response type people, that's not something which we're picking up under this agreement or that we've done in the past. We don't look for doctors and nurses, we don't look for trades. And again, just picking up on advertising, we don't look for recruitment advertising either. Okay, so when you kind of look at things in your life which cause you grief, that cause you to lose sleep, one of them can be for us, stepping in front of an audience of 100 odd people and speaking. It's right up there. When it comes to this actual RFP, my biggest concern is always that one of you will make a big mistake. And by that I mean that we've done our utmost to prepare a solid document. We've put there's been so much peer review, there's a lot of time and effort gone into making sure that the document that we've put out to you is as good as we could possibly make it in the available time. We've put a lot of effort into the response document, try to think, what would it be like? How long would it take for you as providers to fill out, given that you've also got day jobs? Now, we have noticed that there's one cell not working in that response document, so that will be fixed up. So again, we can all make small mistakes, and that's fine. But the bit that always concerns me is that somewhere along the line, really good providers, the likes of you, can actually not put your best foot forward. And most of you are actually in the recruitment game, so if you've ever seen a really good candidate absolutely blow an interview or give you an absolutely horrible CV, that's our concern. It's not that you can't do your job, but that you cannot tell us how well you can do your job. Now, not telling us can come from another number of things. It can mean that you are rushed and you haven't somehow found that critical time to read through the documentation and to answer the questions that we've asked. I kept on kind of thinking about this and something kind of came to mind. It must be with Emma returning from Italy. But I thought of there's an event that would occur in ancient Rome, and I'm not talking about being fed to the lions, that's what it is stepping in front of you guys here today. Something else though, that when there was a victorious general returning to Rome, the Senate would give that general something called a triumph. Massive parade. We're talking lions, we're talking slaves and chains, or, the whole 9 yards. There was something else that general had. Seated beside the general, on the cart, being led through the streets of Rome, was a slave. And the slave would whisper in the general's ear, "Remember, you are not a god. Remember, you are human." So what I'm asking you to do in responding to this RFP is to never lose sight of the fact that you are all top performers. You are here because you are successful as recruiters. But also remember, you are not gods. You can make a mistake. So the thing I always ask people to do is find yourself a slave. Fine. And I'm not talking that poor person has to work their weekends to respond to this RFP. What I am talking about is that person who will just remind you you can make mistakes. So someone outside who will read this document through, who will look at your response and look what we wrote and say, have you really answered that question? You know, MB was asking for this. Have you actually done that? So I mean, again, it's in different roles that I've been, it's the bit that I've always stressed. Sometimes I have been that slave. I've worked with marketing teams and said, look, I know you've got a fantastic proposition, but they've asked for this and I'm not seeing you answer that. As I say, please take that concern away from us. Please do not have us evaluating your proposals in February and March and thinking, in the front of my mind, I know that's a good provider, but what I see in front of me on paper is not the best foot forward from that provider. So here we go. Assume nothing. Provide focused answers with evidence. And please, if in doubt, ask. You have basically between now and a week before Christmas to read through the documents. And again, I would suggest they're read by more than one person in your organisation. Read through the documents. If something doesn't make sense, check with someone in your firm. If you both think, yep, I can't get the answer here, please ask. Let us know. So I'm just going to actually pop into a few things that just might look a little bit different. Those of you who were around for the first generation of this agreement in 2012 might have remembered that we asked a lot of questions about how you were providing to the state sector, kind of the split, lots of numbers and things. We were actually trying to make your Christmas this year and cutting out a lot of that. Well, what we have put in its place is that column that says, please give us your best commercial price for any client. Because what we want to know is, if you look at the yellow side, that's where you're telling us your price that you're offering under this RFP. And that's very, very important to us. At some stage as well, though, we need to justify to our participating agencies and to the government that it was worthwhile for MB to run this particular tender. We need you to be able to assist us to say the kind of pricing and the package that we are offering to participating agencies is about as good as they would get in the market. So again, we need you to recognise that when we combine all our spend, as Susan talked about and Angela, we are a big client and we want to see that reflected. So what we're not saying here that you will be penalised if by any chance your best commercial price you offer to anyone is not the one you're offering to us. But what we want to see in the comments section is the why. And if it's because you have got a massive multinational in New Zealand, we don't need to know the name of that client. We don't want to know the name. We know you have to preserve commercial contracting ethics as well. What we do want to know is a description to say, look, currently we're doing X amount of placements per annum for this organisation, and on that basis they get that price. Now, the last time that we put out this tender, so again in 2012, we offered this slide as a clarification. So this is just a question that comes up quite a bit, and it's to say, how should you be calculating your provider fees? And essentially what we're saying is, don't factor in GST, don't factor in the admin fee or on costs. Just give us your percentage on the base pay of the contractor, the temporary worker, or the salary paid to a permanent staff member. Now, there will be time for questions later if any of this doesn't make any sense. Now, in a schematic here, I have now presented the evaluation process, which is detailed in the RFP. I don't propose to go through that in detail. It's just there so that you can take the pack home. The pack will be made available on Gets later on. One thing I do want to talk about, though, is the minimum criteria, which is the second box. That's set out in the response booklet. And what we're saying there is, essentially the minimum criteria is pretty straightforward. We want you to have an effective operating presence in either Auckland, Christchurch or Wellington. That doesn't necessarily mean you need bricks and mortar offices, but we need to be able to have enough satisfaction that you can effectively service those areas that you propose to do. After that, we need to know that you can accept our standard terms and conditions. but noting that we do allow you to point out areas that you would struggle with, and you need to be financially viable. So we're not setting that bar very high, we're just saying we need you to be essentially good recruitment companies able to operate in our markets. I shall now hand over to Susan for the online panel directory.
Some of you I know are also either already appointed or in the process of being appointed to the Consultancy Services panel. So you may well be aware of our online panel directory. So what the online panel directory is an electronic repository of all of the details of providers who are appointed to our panel. And we're looking to extend its use not just to recruitment but also to our legal services panel as well. What this does, it includes all of your information, so all of your rate information, your quality information, any specific details about you as an organisation that you want to put up there. It's your shop window for our government agencies. Bits of it you will be able to update and change yourselves, bits of it will be locked down. You won't be able to go in there and change your rates, for example, but you can go in there and change links to your website or update names and addresses of personnel and key contacts. It's a way of you having one source of the truth for all of the information regarding you as a provider on the contract. So you can go into there and provide a brief description of you as an organisation with a link through to your website, and then all you have to do is maintain that website to keep all of our providers, all of our agencies up to date with the information that you have as a provider. We've rolled it out on Consultancy Tranche 1. We've got 80, almost 90 agencies now who are using it. The feedback from all of them has been overwhelmingly positive. They really like using it. It's really quick, it's really easy, it's searchable. I'll show you a screenshot of it in a minute. It's searchable, it's really easy for them to use. And our providers like it as well because it means that they can have access to a site where they can put new information in about themselves as it becomes available. They don't have to wait for us to refresh a 2-inch thick panel directory, which we then send out to government agencies. And in the length of time that takes, the information is quite often out of date. So this is a way of keeping that information up to date in real time. But essentially it allows government agencies to search by job lot, by temp, contractor or perm, or by payroll. It allows them to search by geographical area, so where you can provide services. It also allows them to make a short list, so they can download a short list of providers who they want to send an RSO out to, or who they want to select to go on a sub-panel of their own. So this is what it looks like to the government agencies. We've tried to make it as intuitive and as user-friendly as possible, and as I say, the feedback that we've had on it so far has been overwhelmingly positive. In terms of telling you about the RFP and telling you about what the next steps are, we're almost at an end, but we just wanted to include something around probity. We take the probity and the integrity of our processes extremely seriously. So we have an independent auditor on board to look at the probity, or to make sure that we're staying on track with the probity for recruitment. It's Sean McHale from McHale Group who is here today. So, and if you do have any questions, as John said, we'll take questions at the end, but if you do have any questions or concerns around probity, Sean's happy to answer those for you today. His details are also in the RFP, so if there are specific issues you would like to raise with him, please do so. We've also reserved the right to come to you at the end of the process and ask you how you found the process and whether there were any issues that you experienced during the course of the process. Depending on how the process goes, we may or may not take that up as an option. So an indicative timeline. The RFP was released on the 18th of November. We were a couple of weeks late. Those of you who came to the early market engagement will know we were aiming for October. various things conspired against us, not least that thing that woke me up at midnight the other Sunday. I don't like being woken up like that. So RFP is now in the market with a closing date of the 1st of February. We've given you a decent amount of time because we know it's Christmas and it's also the summer holidays. So we've given you until the 1st of February to respond to this RFP. We'll conduct our evaluations through February and March. Our evaluators are not us. We don't evaluate your responses. Our evaluators are taken from people out there in agencies who are recruiters or who use recruiters or who are from HR teams out there in government agencies. They're predominantly based around our client advisory group, who are the subject matter experts that we use to develop these RFPs and put them out into the market. So they will be conducting this evaluation. They may not know who you are as an organisation if they haven't used you. So as John said, please assume nothing. Assume they know nothing about you when you're writing your response. And then in April and May, we will collate those evaluations, do the moderations, and be looking to contract award at that point in time. Our aim is to have a contract in place to give us a transition period from the existing contract, so contract in place by the middle of next year to allow us a couple of months or so to transition agencies away from the existing agreement and onto the new one, which expires in September. The existing one expires in September. So a few questions that we think you might ask us, and we're going to try and provide the answers. Do I have to be a panel member in order to supply my services to government? If an agency is signed up to the AoG arrangement, we do expect them to purchase through the arrangement and not to go off panel. However, there will be government agencies who don't sign up to the panel. We have about 130 mandated agencies, but that still leaves a fair chunk of the market who we just encourage to use these contracts. So if an agency is signed, yes, you do need to be on the panel, but if they're not, no, you can still provide services to them. Will lowest cost providers win the majority of the assignments? Not if our experience under the current arrangement is anything to go by. Price has not been an indicator of where people are going to do their recruitment. The level of service has been really key in that. And that's what we want to focus on in this next generation, is the value and the quality of the service that is being provided into government, because we know that's where our government agencies are looking when they're making their recruitment decisions. The size and the makeup of the panel will be determined by the capacity that we need as government, and that's not just nationally, that's in the regions as well. So we will be looking at regional providers and the capacity that they can provide into those regions, and the panel will be made up on that basis. As Angela said earlier, we make no guarantee of business to you as government agencies, but we do look at the capacity that we have and try and size and structure our panel accordingly. So how the panel will operate, especially regarding lots, John talked to you earlier about the lots that we now have under this contract. As with the current contract, if you are appointed to a particular lot, you will not be allowed to market yourself in other lots that you are not appointed to. However, if a government agency says, oh, you're doing all of those 6 roles for me, can you do me that one as well? And that one is in a lot that you're not appointed to, we do not expect you to be turning work away. Trades are not included because we realise that they are very specialist. It doesn't mean that we're never going to do anything for trades, it just means that this RFP just doesn't cover trades. We are looking to do something in the future around trades, do some really serious investigation around what that means and what that might look like and how many agencies have a requirement for it and how we might structure an RFP if that's the way that we decide to go. So we will be investigating that, it's just not included here. You can, I'm going to have to ask John to answer this question. The adjusting the rate card? annual adjustment is permitted in line with CPI? Yes. I am right. However, if you want, that's an upward adjustment in line with CPI. If you want to reduce your price at any time, please feel free. We're not averse to that at all. If you have no previous engagement history with government, tell us about your history with other organisations. Just because you've never worked with government before doesn't mean that we wouldn't want to include you here. If you're a good recruiter, you're a good recruiter, whether that's to the public or the private sector. So please do tell us about your previous experience, and if you can relate that to government, great. If not, relate it to an organisation that is similar in size and shape to what we're looking for. So, that's us. Ben. Oh, you have to speak loud, Ben.
Okay. Is there price harmony in the contract? Is that what you're going for? One price across all lots of providers?
No. No. We did, when you will have come along to the early market engagement, and we did look at that as an idea, but that's not what we're looking for, no.
Okay, so it'll be different prices.
As it is at the moment, yeah.
The only area where there is harmony is on the conversion rates, and that is something that we took from the workshops both with the supplier community and with participating agencies. There's a strong demand to move away from what everyone seemed to find was quite a confusing area.
Will there still be the value for money scoring model?
In the way that it's structured at the moment around the customer satisfaction survey, we're looking at that at the moment because I look after all of the service contracts and we use a similar model across all of them to varying degrees of success. We are aware that there are flaws in the way that it currently operates, so we're looking at how that might operate going forward. Nothing firm as yet, but we'll work with providers and with government agencies to determine what that looks like.
How will you ensure that the evaluators that might have a negative perception of somebody who's responding, that later perception won't influence their scoring?
In terms of their raw score, when they sit down and look at the proposal, that's between them and the piece of paper that's in front of them. However, what we do with all of our evaluations is we bring everybody together and we moderate those scores. So if there is an outlier who is marking somebody particularly highly or particularly low, then we can moderate that across the other evaluators that we have on the panel. And our probity auditors are involved in that. They help us, they come and sit in on those moderation sessions so that we get the opportunity to do some normalisation of the scores that we've got.
Will there be a admin fee for payroll open source?
Yes.
Can we do away with the most basic?
No.
You took a while.
In this RFP, there is a bit more focus on contractors converting to direct contractors, where that's coming from. And are there any other AoG agreements where after a period of time you get the product or service free after each period of time, or is it just the recruitment contract?
I can probably answer that. It's as I said, what we've looked to do here is something iterative. We've looked at how the previous Generation 1 agreement, the one that's still in place, has operated. So what we're not trying to do is to change the market or shake up the market. What we're actually saying is we're observing both from the private and public sector that purchasing organisations are moving to a point where sometimes they wish to convert their contractors onto their payroll. And so we've got the participating agencies saying to us, well, how will that be priced? What will the mechanism be? So this is not us shaping policy. This is us reacting to what is actually occurring in both the private and the public sector.
Where is that occurring outside of government?
It's certainly happening with the banks, I can say that from my own experience. You're the recruiters, you should be able to see that yourself.
I've been in the industry for 20 years, I've never seen it. It just seems to have come out of the blue. When I've attended all the consulting briefings that you've had, just, yeah,
there's nothing on this which should be different than what's actually happened. The only thing which we've sought to do is to actually have some standard conversion rates. The conversions have been occurring under the current agreement.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah. What we're not saying is that after 12 months, a contractor has to convert to payroll. We're not saying that. What we're giving agencies, because they are converting contractors to payroll that they've had for 2, 3, 4 years in some instances, they're converting them to payroll, and they want the opportunity to do that. So that's why we've brought payroll in as a core service as opposed to an additional service. We're not setting any rules around when that has to happen. So we're not saying that after 12 months a contractor should become a direct payroll only contractor. That's not what we're saying.
And we do not set policy for government agencies.
Yeah.
Are the evaluators coming from the different locations?
Yes. Yeah. So we'll have evaluators representing all 3 areas. Yeah.
So there's no intention for an e-auction like last time?
Oh, we should have had a sweep on how long it took to ask that question. I think we learnt a lot from having done that. So legal services and recruitment were the first 2 service contracts that AoG took to the market. And we learnt a lot of lessons from those early interactions. Recruitment is out in the market now. Legal goes out into the market early next year. There was pushback on the auction from both communities, both recruiters and legal providers. So it's unlikely that we will use that, if only because I don't want the bruises again. But it is unlikely that we will go down that route. Having said that, that doesn't mean that we won't negotiate with you. We just may not use that as the tool to do that.
If I can add something there, we have very deliberately used the words negotiations if required. You can make our life a lot easier and a lot simpler if on the 1st of February we're receiving tenders which have your best foot forward. So we don't want to see you putting prices forward and then holding something back for negotiations. We would love not to have to negotiate. Now again, that's essentially what drove the e-auction in the past, was a sense that there was money sitting on the table, or that, you know, we're not chasing the last skerrick here. We are asking, we're asking to be treated as a large purchaser. On the other hand, we also want you as an industry to be able to make money and for you to thrive and survive. But what I am saying is, please, 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 if you take back a message, it's one that says, my best foot is going forward. You know, if later on we use our right to negotiate and we come to you and we say, oh, is there any chance you could go over here? If you say to us, on the 1st of February, we gave you our absolute bottom dollar, we did all the spreadsheets, we cut everything out, here it is, we will accept that. You know, we might not like the news, but that there is a point where if there are negotiations, you will always have the right to say that is our best price. We put our best foot forward. That is actually what we're asking for.
Give us examples of how you decide who you would negotiate with under what circumstances.
At this moment, no. We just reserve the right to negotiate.
I think a lot of that will depend on what comes back and what we get, and the spread of the rates that we get back.
How do you include the assessment of the current performance of an agency, of a supplier under the contract with the RFP process?
We don't take any of that into consideration.
Except, of
It's
course,
a
for
complete-
the reference side.
It's a complete clean slate. The only way that it may come into play is if a current agency who's using you under the agreement is someone that you put forward as a referee.
And of the current agreement across the panel of 40, what's the share of spend across that panel proportionally? Is it 20% receiving 80% of the spend? Is it 50% of the panel covering 80% of the spend?
I think the 80-20 rule probably does apply here, but all of the providers that are under the on the panel have received business over the life of the contract.
And the pricing is 35% weighting on pricing. And in the common corporate category, it's also been merged with common corporate admin. And there seem to be two different types of firms that deliver those two different services with different cost structures. So we're all going against each other in that situation.
The job lots are set like they are because that's how we've seen them pan out over the last 5 years.
Does that disadvantage the common corporate? It feels like it does. That's what I'm asking.
No, I don't think it will. I don't think it will because we will look at the services that you provide as an organisation. Yeah. Sorry, Richard, you were going to...
There's a lot of discussion around MSP and RPO sort of coming into this. Is there an intention from sort of Excellence to look at that in the future, or...?
The contract as it written allows that to happen, and so if a government agency wishes to go down the MSP route, they can use a provider off the contract to do that, or they can bring in an external MSP provider and to manage whoever they choose to select from the panel. So we have allowed for that within the contract. We haven't gone down the route of an MSP contract because we don't think that that meets the needs of the majority of our government agencies. But you can operate that model under the contract as an agency if you wish to.
Are we going to see any technology implemented into the next revision of the contract in terms of going forwards to make our lives a bit easier around reporting or
We're constantly developing our approach to IT solutions and making things easier and streamlining our processes. So we have streamlined our reporting across other contracts. Recruitment has been slightly different because of the volume that we ask for. One of the things that we are looking at is streamlining that reporting for recruitment and making that simpler for you. And the development of e-tools going forward is something that we've very definitely got on our radar.
The market share reporting and the spend reporting that we look on a regular basis, that seems to have stopped. Is that
Yes, it will. You should have received them. We have been churning them out, so I'll take that one back. Yeah.
So is the role of the Centre of Excellence going forward? Do you see that changing, particularly in terms of engagement? So do you see that changing?
I'd like to see the COE build on the relationships that we've got already and the good work that we've done both for those providers on the panel and off-panel providers as well, because we do have a relationship with them. I think going forward, our relationship with both the agencies and the providers on the panel is going to be around promulgating best practice and developing as many tools and guides as we can to educate government agencies on the best way to use the panel, but also educating providers on how agencies operate so that we can minimise the reactive things that the COE has been doing around, we've got this issue, how do we solve it? We've tried to address some of those in this version of the contract, and we know that there's some guidance and help that we need to provide to both sides going forward. And I'd like to see us do that more as a COE and be more collaborative with both our customers and our suppliers.
Could I ask about leakage? If we accept that leakage has occurred over the life of the current contract, isn't allowing providers to subcontract to others not on the panel just going to increase the incidence of leakage?
It's still keeping the integrity of the panel because it's still being put through the panel. And when we allow subcontracting, it has to be with the agreement of the agency. Subcontracting is allowed now, but it's with the agreement of the COE. So we have to say, yes, that's fine. All we're doing now is saying that actually that responsibility more readily sits with the agency. And the provider should be dealing with the agency.
Have you had many requests for subcontracting over the term of the current contract?
We have, yeah, and in some instances we've allowed it, and in some instances we haven't. Yeah.
Another question: the figures that you provided on spend across payrolling, temp, contracting and perm are really of extremely limited value given that they include the base pay of contractors and temps. Why can you not provide the figures for contracting and temps exclusive of the base pay so it reflects the true spend?
We can do that. If you'd like to put that through as a clarification question through GETS, we can do that. We could also possibly, don't hold me to this, give you details of placement numbers as well, which might be even more beneficial. Yeah.
Susan, in the questions that have been evaluated, there's a number of scenarios there that we've never come across as a business, so we wouldn't be able to respond to them. So, can we say not applicable so that we don't get penalised for never having lost a client or something like that?
Yeah, I think if you say we haven't ever lost a client, we've kept all of our client base, that will count in your favour. But if we are genuinely asking you about something that you have no experience of and you can articulate that, just saying not applicable wouldn't give us very much. But if you can articulate and perhaps why you've never lost a client, what things you do as an organisation, then that's the way that I would answer that question.
Sorry, it's me again. One of the clauses refers to collaborating with other providers. Why is that of interest to you?
I think it's a way for us to see how you do that, and if you do that, and whether it's something that would be of a benefit to our government agencies. So if they're dealing with two providers, perhaps an IT, somebody who provides IT people, and someone who provides more administrative or call centre people, for instance, how that collaboration might work in terms of bringing those people into the business. So it's that kind of approach, and how you would work if you were taking over from an existing provider perhaps as well.
Going back to the payroll question, can you foresee a circumstance where you have a contractor working for 12 months and then the request is made that we payroll our own contractor? Just, that you've got the free contractor to direct contractor version.
Yeah.
Is there a circumstance that at 12 months we're going to be payrolling our own contractors?
That could happen if an agency requests that of you, and that is for you to determine with that government agency. That happens now. We have instances where that happens now. Any further questions, please do put them through GETS. Clarification is open until a week before Christmas, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.